Priorities. This is the focus of our devotional this week. There is a well-known story that teaches a life lesson. It goes like this. A professor has an empty jar on a desk. The professor then takes some rocks and begins to fill the jar. Upon completion, the professor addresses the class of students and asks them if the jar is full. The students say yes. Then the professor pulls pebbles out from under the desk and drops them in the jar, and the pebbles fill in the gaps between the larger rocks. Again, the professor asks, "Is the jar full?" And then the students say, "Yes, now the jar is full." But then the professor pulls out sand and pours it in the jar. The sand fills in the cracks between the rocks and the pebbles. And then the professor asks again, "Is the jar full?" The students, laughing, then say, "Yes, now the jar is full." The idea here is how to prioritize correctly. The jar is our life and time. The large rocks represent the important things in life: God, family, work, etc. The pebbles are the necessary things: sleep, hygiene, chores, paying bills, etc. And the sand is the small stuff: hobbies, social media, the pleasures of life. If we prioritize correctly, we have time for all of it. But when we organize our lives out of order, the jar gets filled before the important things get put in, and we leave no space for those important things. The Bible teaches us to prioritize our lives as well. Jesus teaches us from Matthew 6, verses 27 through 34, this: "Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See the flowers of the field grow? They do not labor or spin, but I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, 'What shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear?' For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." Jesus is saying, seek first the kingdom, seek first God and his righteousness, and then everything else will follow after. He also says this in Matthew 7, verses 24 through 28. He tells a story. "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a man who built his house on the rock. The rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew against and beat the house. Yet it didn't fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." When Jesus finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority, not as their teachers of the law. Jesus also says this, when the Pharisees and Sadducees tried to catch him. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Jesus is telling us consistently to prioritize correctly. He tells us the most important commandments are to love God and love people. Jesus tells us to seek the kingdom and God and His righteousness first. And He tells us to build our lives on the rock to make sure our foundation, or where we start, are His words. So let's help each other prioritize correctly. God bless.